The U.S. Center is organized by the Department of State as a public diplomacy space, organized specifically so that we can highlight some of the great work that's being done on climate change and climate action, not only in the United States but across the world. This amazing thing is NOAA's Science on a Sphere. NOAA stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and this is an unbelievable way that we can communicate how changes across our world are actually occurring spatially, as basically we would see it as if you're standing from outside Earth looking down on it. Well, we're all connected, and specifically when we're talking about the oceans and the atmospheres, that's over everywhere. It's not just over one country, it's the entire globe. So when we're monitoring the world and we're trying to see what's changing, we want to provide those data sets to the world so everyone can look at it and learn for themselves. Well, NOAA does a lot of research, not only looking at climate change, but also just monitoring what's going on right now across the world. We can see what changes are occurring now, we can see what types of impacts are happening on a weather time scale to a climate time scale. So we not only keep the data, we also do make forecasts, we also do research on what's going to happen to our future. And NOAA, we do provide data to decision makers, we do research for them as well, and we try to encapsulate what our data is actually saying in a way that's a little bit more understandable to the rest of the world, because data by itself is not useful. You need to actually look at that data and come to a conclusion about what that data is actually saying. So yeah, I was named America's Scientist Idol at a competition held by the American Association for the Advancement of Science a couple of years ago. So basically that's just saying that I'm a pretty good communicator of science, and I think it's so important when we're talking about science communication, because oftentimes there can be a disconnect between what we as scientists are actually researching and communicating that effectively, so people actually understand what we're trying to say, why it's important, what the impacts can be. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I would say that science has really improved, our communication has improved about what climate change is actually saying, and I think there's as you can tell here just from COP21 and everything going on back home, it's a groundswell of understanding now, I would say, that climate change is a big deal and it's caused by humans. So yeah, as scientists we tend to talk a lot, and we like to kind of get into the really in-depth, specific, technical aspects of our science, because that's what interests us. But we have to recognize that just like we don't like other things, people sometimes don't want to get into that much in-depth the technical details. So it's a way of talking about our science. It's not dumbing it down. That's not talking down to people, but it's just communicating what it means. What are the impacts from what we're actually seeing, and kind of talking more at a level that people can understand in general, and not try kind of getting too specific or too, I guess you could say, digressing from the main point of what our research is.
I think it hasn't changed much, because we considered the submissions of INDCs of all the main emitters, if you like. We waited until India had submitted, and India and China in particular, mainland China, make a huge difference. So I think if we now would do the analysis, or we are doing the reanalysis, it wouldn't change much. Maybe it goes down to 2.65 or something. This is the expectation. I have to say it again. If nothing else would be done, but if all the INDCs would be fully implemented. And you know, when policymakers promise something, it's not always so that they fully hold their promise. No, absolutely. Here at the end, I hope we will have an agreement to stay as much as possible below 2 degrees, possibly even reach 1.5 degree, and we clearly are not there. So, but we have come at least halfway, I would say, because when we did our analysis with the Climate Action Tracker 2 years ago, we were close to 4 degrees warming by the end of the century. So you see, we have more or less done half of the mileage we have to cover, but this should encourage us to do more. We clearly have to go further down that road, and hopefully this agreement will help us to do it, because it will include a review mechanism, I hope, which precisely means do not stop at 2.7, go down below 2 degrees. Now this would be if there would be no climate policies implemented. If we would do what we call business as usual, the world just keeps on using fossil fuels, economies also in Asia are growing in the old way, then we would end up with probably 4 to 5 degrees warming by 2100, but even 8 to 12 degrees in 200 or 300 years from now. It would be a completely different planet. And of course we have to do everything to avoid that. Yes, it would. Probably our civilization would be at stake. We have done at the Potsdam Institute a huge report for the World Bank. In 2012, it was called Turn Down the Heat. It reached more than 1 billion people, you have to imagine. And it was precisely how would a 4 degrees warmer world look like. And we simply have seen that in particular in the tropics and the subtropics, Taiwan is part of the subtropics, you would have tremendous changes. Agriculture would in the end fail in many places. You would have natural disasters at a scale which we couldn't manage anymore. We probably would have waves of refugees. We have a refugee crisis in Europe right now, but compared to what would happen in a world 4 or 6 degrees warmer, that's nothing really. We would probably have migration in the hundreds of millions of people. So we need everything to avoid that. I mean, the conservative assumption is sort of published by the IPCC, the World Climate Council, is about 1 meter by the end of the century, which is already a lot, of course. If the world would warm by 4 degrees in the long term, we would probably have sea level rise of 10 meters. If the world would warm 8 to 12 degrees, if we burn all the fossil fuels we have, it would be 50 meters. And that would mean all the coastlines we know now are more or less disappearing. Yeah, but it is our role in a democracy, you know. You have the experts, you have the voters, you have the business people, and you have the politicians, and it's a division of labor. I can only shine a light on the problem. But it's my duty to create as much light as possible and to shed this light on the landscape of challenges and solutions. In the end, the decisions have to be made by society, and the politicians are the representatives of society. They have a huge responsibility, actually. So if they do not listen to people like me, history may judge them, actually, in a very negative way.